members. First place meeting of the new year. First of all, just to remind you that this is a webcasting meeting and the meeting will be webcast. Members are reminded the need to activate their microphones before speaking. The Chairman would like to remind everyone present that the meeting will be broadcast live for the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewing or another use by such third parties. If you are seated in the lower public seating area, it is likely that the recording cameras will capture your image, and this will result in the possibility that your image will become part of the broadcast. This may infringe your human and data protection rights, and if you wish to avoid this, you should move to the upper public gallery. Almost think that should be on a recording now. Okay, apologies for absence, Laura.
Apologies for absence from Councillor Heap, Councillor Judy Jennings, Councillor Macready and Councillor Morgan.
And substitute members?
Substitute Councillor Janet Whitehouse for Councillor Macready.
Thank you. As you've probably noticed, we are without a Vice Chairman tonight, so I'd like to ask Richard Bassett if you all approve to join me up here. Thank you. Nobody else did. There you go, that side. Okay, do we have any declarations of interest? Do you take that as no? Okay. Notes of the previous meeting, pages 3 to 6. Has anybody got anything to raise from these, or? Yes, Janet.
When it comes to the work programme, I was going to ask that we could have an item on from then to come back, because quite a lot of things were going to happen, and it'd be nice to know if they have.
Yes, the work programme is, as I said earlier, we are out of sync at the moment with the main scrutiny committee. The work programme will change. One of the good things that has come out of the last meeting is training for members of the committees. For example, item 7 on your list, which is Essex Highways, that will go to an all-members briefing. The market policy will come to place, apparently. But if anybody's got any recommendations on them, we will come, speak now and we will put them on the list.
Chairman, I'm having some difficulty in hearing you. If you could just speak up a bit, please. I was just going to ask if we've got an item 6, sustainable transport, but it doesn't look very definite. If we could have a definite date so that the officer comes back to tell us what's happening, it'd be good.
As I say, by the next meeting, we will have a more definite working programme. That's right, isn't it, Laura? Does that answer your question? No.
Just makes it a very long time scale if we can't put it on the now. Another 7 months before we have another meeting.
I accept that, but if we've got any recommendations that you do want to put in, let us know and we will take them forward. So I think you've asked a question on the next thing, haven't you, terms of reference? Has anybody else got anything on terms of reference before we move on? Oh, that's quite easy then, wasn't it? Can you hear me now, by the way?
Obviously not.
Janet, can you hear me? Can you hear us now or not? I said, could you hear us?
Not very well, but I'll struggle on.
Okay, well, we come on now to the main point tonight, which is James Warwick, who some of you know, is going to take us through the litter strategy policy.
Thank you. The reason for the litter strategy to be presented to you tonight is to set out Epping Forest District Council's commitment to follow the government's litter strategy for England, the Environment Protection Act 1990 and the Code of Practice of Litter and Refuge 2019. We currently do not have a litter strategy and we can continue to operate without one, although it's considered best practice to have a litter strategy, and hence why one of the reasons why this strategy has been developed. It's already been to the Waste Management Partnership Board, and it is due to go to Cabinet on the 18th of July. This strategy explains how we will continue to meet the government's expectations on litter and reflects residents' desire to have clean and healthy environments free of litter, fly tipping and dog waste. The strategy sets out our legal duty in terms of litter, the code of practice, accountability, enforcement, actions and the council priorities. In terms of enforcement, actions and priorities, first and foremost, we want to prevent litter in the first place, so we want to work with partners to educate around not to litter in the first place, but also to be able to enforce where there are fly tips and littering takes place. We will continue to work in partnership with local volunteer groups, Keep Britain Tidy, town and parish councils, schools, Lee Valley Regional Park and Corporation of London, and many of our local businesses, as well as other local authorities throughout Essex and in neighbouring districts. All of this work in order to try and prevent and reduce the amount of litter and encourage reuse and recycling. We already take part in national initiatives such as Great British Spring Clean, which took place at the end of March, early April this year. We ran a litter competition for the first time during that period. We had 5 litter picks during that period. We had one in Thornwood Common, one in Matching Tye, one in Roydon, one in Sheeran and one in Limes, and a total of 72 bags of litter were collected from those litter picks. This year to date, we've had 16 applications for support and equipment with litter picks from volunteers. 15 of those have already been completed and taken part, and the remaining one is due to take place shortly, and we kind of provide the high-vis, the litter grabbers, gloves and all the bags, and we liaise with the coordinators to collect and dispose of the litter. So in terms of the litter picking side, we are extremely grateful and appreciative that many of the voluntary organisations and town parishes that carry out the litter picks throughout the year that also don't really require our help. So the strategy is pretty self-explanatory, and it's, as I've mentioned, it's presented here tonight before it goes to Cabinet for approval and adoption. First and foremost, as I've said, this litter strategy is about what our legal duty is in terms of litter, the code of practice, and what we will do. And then anything, if this strategy is adopted and approved, we will work with colleagues across the council in terms of improving the education message and enforcement of litter. I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. I was very interested to hear the officer's examples just now in what he said about specific things that the council is doing for litter, because I didn't see any of that in the report. I was going to ask at the end of the report, 8.5, it talks about targeting enforcement days, but I have no idea what a target enforcement day is. There's no explanation, and it comes right at the end of the report there. In fact, I have a couple of specific questions, and then I'll come back to what I was going to say. In page 11, it talks about the way you're going to measure success, and it says, i.e., less waste to landfill. I mean, i.e. stands for, that is what you're going to do, not an example. So how are you going to, do you really think that less waste going to landfill is an appropriate measure of the litter? Because that depends on how much residents put in their wheelie bins and so forth, doesn't it? I can't see that this is the right measure. Just like you say a little bit more about that, then if I could come back, Chairman, with a couple of other questions, please.
Sure.
In terms of measuring our overall waste, that's really the only method we've got in terms of measuring the amount by reducing the amount that goes to landfill is a key indicator. In terms of enforcement, as I mentioned, that we can work with. The enforcement isn't the responsibility of the waste team in that, so the intention would be that we would work with our enforcement colleagues, and we can develop some measures to go into the strategy in terms of the number of fixed penalty notices issued, and in terms of the number of fly tips as well. We can add that to the document.
Yeah, I do think that it needs a bit more of specifics as to how you are going to measure success. And I was interested, you've just mentioned fixed penalty notices. That was one of the things that I was going to raise, because they're not mentioned in this strategy at all, not that I could find it. I mean, you may be able to point out the page, but I have read it quite carefully. There's nothing there about that being a means of enforcement. I can remember the environment officers going out and doing, walks down the high street, and the emphasis on education rather than actually, giving people a fixed penalty notice, but it was there. But I couldn't see any reference to that in the report. My concern about the report, which I don't think is ready to go to Cabinet and certainly not out to the public yet, is that it's quite wordy, it's quite long, it's quite a bit of repetition, but it's not really clear to, look at and see what is it that it's all about. I mean, if you look up enforcement, which is item 6, is it? 8.5. No, that's the second mention of enforcement. There's this whole section on enforcement earlier on. 6, I think it was. Which page was it?
Page
11, I think, of the...
Page
10.
Right, there's...
Page 10.
Yeah, enforcement strategy. It doesn't say there exactly what you're going to do. It talks about it's important. It talks about prevention, which has been talked about before. And even in actions, it just says the aim of the Council's enforcement policy is first and foremost prevention. And it talks about working with partners. But it doesn't actually say what you're going to do about enforcement. Surely the FPNs are one way that you would do it. And then, enforcement comes up again at the end. I just think the whole thing needs rethinking, laying out in a more concise format to make it an easier document to read, because there's quite a lot of information there. It's just not really presented in a very easy way to read. And things like measurement need to be clearer. Just asking about specific things, though, you talk about working with the other agencies. You mentioned Essex for weed control. The weeds in the pavements near me are absolutely terrible. I just wondered, what practically you do when you work with Essex on weeds. So perhaps you could comment on that.
Yeah. So we, in terms of the weed spraying, we do this on behalf of Essex County Council, but unfortunately over a number of years, the budget that we're given to do that has been cut drastically. So I think it does limit our ability, how many times that we can spray to get rid of the weeds. Also, there are restrictions in terms of and recent changes in terms of the chemicals that are used on that. But if I take that back, I can speak to the waste team and get you the specific schedule of how often the weed spraying takes place.
Just as a last comment then, I don't understand how weeds actually come under litter. There's a lot of stuff in here seems to be waste rather than just litter, but I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brady?
Yeah. Could I just ask, how does your strategy ally with that of county who manage the tips? Because fly tipping is absolutely out of control. I've got a country area. It's absolutely out of control. It's just several days a week in all the country lanes. It's horrendous. And part of it is because, it's the builders aren't allowed to take toilets and this, that and the other to the tips. And we did hear something about county was going to change its policy. So it's very, very difficult. I'm not blaming you at all, but I'm just wondering, you can't do it without county's help and without you working together. I just wonder if you could tell us what the situation is now with what people are allowed to take to tips, please.
Yeah, we work closely with Essex County Council. We're part of the Essex Waste Partnership Board. So there's regular meetings, regular dialogue. We're working closely with Essex to refresh and develop a new waste strategy for the county. In terms of fly tipping, any fly tipping that is reported to us, the waste team will remove. We're not aware that we're not inundated with calls to remove fly tipping at the moment, and that so unless the fly tipping's reported, we can't move them. And then in terms of the tips, I can get back to you with more information on Essex County Council. I know that Essex County Council now have a booking system for tips, and they're kind of monitoring the usage, and they're looking to enforce in terms of people that shouldn't be kind of tipping the rubbish there. But for more specific details, I have to speak to Essex and get back to you on that. But we are working closely.
Well, that isn't giving me any sort of answer at all, is it? I mean, what I'm asking is, are they going to allow builders, etc., or some, to take some rubbish to their tips or not? Because, yes, it's getting worse and worse and worse with having to book appointments and this, that and the other. It just dissuades people. And we've been told that they were going to loosen up because... And you're telling me fly tipping isn't... You're telling me there's not much fly tipping and you're not inundated with it? I just cannot believe that because, I've just driven back from Chigwell today. When I drove to Chigwell along Epping Lane, I drove along an empty road, and when I came back, a lorry had tipped a whole load literally on the road this evening in the 2.5, 3 hours I'd been at Chigwell. And it's just constant, up Berwick Lane, Tawney Lane, everywhere. It's like twice a week, lorry loads going now. And, if you say it's not out of control, that's excellent. But Biffa have been taking longer and longer and longer to pick stuff up. And there's still stuff in the lanes there that's not been picked up by them. So I don't really tally the two things together. I see it out of control. It's just so much worse than it's ever been. I've lived in, that exact area for 34 years, and it is 34 times worse than it ever was. So I don't really see that things are all under control and it's all fine, because it just looks grim to us. And yes, we are the ones that do. I've arranged litter picks in our parish, again, for about the last 25 years, because I get so incensed with it, and we've already done one this year, but I've managed to get such enthusiasm amongst the locals. They say they want more, so it's us that's got the outstanding one that I'm arranging yet again in another 5 weeks' time. And they want 4 litter picks a year. They think they're going to help me, but I don't know how much. I don't know if they really will. But yeah, so anyway, I'm not quite sure that you fully understand. And my other little question was, do BIFA want us to separate? Is it any help to them at all to separate paper from plastic and all that? Because it seems a bit strange lobbing it all in together. That's my last question, promise.
No, there is no need to separate because it's separated at their birth.
Right, I should go to Councillor Lyon now on Zoom and then come to Councillor Heather.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and congratulations on becoming Chairman of this committee. Wonderful committee. I wanted to say a few things. First of all, thanks to BIFA and their litter picking squads, because I've seen them around the district in various places, and I know that they do a regular litter pick every couple of weeks. But this is only a tip of the iceberg, and I think it's important that we do look at an education programme. I've seen sort of hints of that in the report, but it is about prevention, because the cost of failure, which is what you're reporting here, must be a lot higher than the price of success, which is not getting litter dropped. Has any thought been given to the sort of education programme that could be considered? Because we've got people at the youth council, we've got the schools, we've got the town and parish councils that are doing regular picks, and I have some sympathy with what Councillor Brady has said and her enthusiasm for litter, because it is quite a problem. But have we thought more about an education programme and how that programme will be engendered, and what needs to be put in place, and what will follow this report in terms of that action to actually make it better? Thank you.
Can I come back, James?
Thank you, Councillor Lyon. In terms of education programme, we intend to work with the local schools, work with resources that we've got, such as the Youth Council, community champions. We've got an education package in terms of recycling that we've delivered to community groups and school. So I would see that in terms of litter prevention, it goes hand in hand with kind of the reuse and recycling message, and we would develop a programme that we could offer to community groups such as Scouts and to schools, and also awareness campaigns. So working with Essex County Council in terms of the Love Essex campaign, where there's kind of posters, social media messages, and just a kind of a targeted campaign throughout the year.
Thank you, James. Councillor
Maybe
Heather?
something needs to be included in this report.
Councillor Heather?
Thank you, Chair. I'll obviously give way to my councillor friend, Councillor Lyon.
He was waiting a
Right.
long while.
So I'm not one to stand on protocol. Going back to, as Councillor Whitehouse mentioned earlier about the enforcement, we've got signs on lampposts all throughout the district stating that you will be fined £100 or so if you allow your dog to foul the footpath. So are we saying that that's just a waste of time having a sign because we're not going to enforce that at any point?
No, the enforcement, the neighbourhood team that deal with enforcement will continue to enforce any littering offences. The intention of this strategy is not to stop enforcing. It is just one of many tools to try and reduce litter with enforcement. I think with enforcement, It's how far can you go and how much resources that you have at your disposal to actually enforce.
Your permission, Chair. Leading on from that then, run about trying to recycle stuff that's left in litter bins on the street. Dog fouling is now accepted to be put in amongst general litter, whereas at one point there was a dedicated dog mess bin, what you seem to have got rid of, and it's acceptable now. So I can't see that the contents of that litter bin is going to be recycled if it's got dog mess in amongst it.
It can be separated and cleaned at the Edmonton MRF.
Thank you. Councillor Bassett?
Thank you. Yes, I read this several times, and unfortunately I feel it's not a strategy, it's just statement of facts. It's not what are we going to do. To be honest, I think the strategy should be education, prevention and enforcement. Quite clearly, this is how we're going to deal with it, this is how we're going to teach people, try and stop the people littering in the first place by proper education, and also the enforcement side. If we do enforce and we enforce strongly, then we can use, I know there's some rules as to what we can use those fines for. What we could use them for is putting more litter bins in place, better collection routines, things like this, which can be used. And also I think we're looking at the fines, they're so minimal, these companies couldn't care less if they get caught. It's so small. We ought to complain and ask for higher fines for any fly tipping. It should be mega, and that would actually deter people more. Now, also on this, just glancing through, Section 7, external partners, we did miss out the adjoining boroughs, like Broxbourne, some of the edging London boroughs. And also, yes, we've got litter picking, and I think we're leaving it to groups to do. Perhaps we should actually do some coordination between the groups and almost have a litter picking task force where we descend on an area to get it tidy and then move on to the next one. I know it's difficult, but I know our team are out there in Nazing about every other week picking it up, and the problem they've got is a week later it's all back again from motorists throwing it out. So therefore the idea of proactive enforcement, to actually look for this, go to areas where there is high litter being deposited. For instance, I know where I am, we've got two, shall we say, sandwich shops, and people stand outside, eat it and just drop it on the floor. The bin is 5 foot away, but they can't be bothered. Now, also on this, I noticed where 8.5 enforcement, I was very disappointed in this statement. It says, enforcement from an operational standpoint can be uneconomical, it does not directly or immediately cleanse a litter-strewn area and can be expensive without any degree of success. So are we saying, well, it's not worth us doing anything about it? If I read that, that's my motto is, we're not going to do anything. Because it's too expensive, and if we do catch anyone, well, they don't get fined anyway, so why do we bother? There should be something in there saying we will always, if we catch anyone, go for a conviction on something or other. Also on this, I was reading, when we got to the street cleaning standards, I went through the list here and I noticed there was not really any rural areas on page 18, not even mentioned. I know there's Nazing, Roydon not mentioned, haven't been there, yet they've got quite major problems in this area. And I have to normally chase Biffa to say, can you come and do a bit of cleaning here, because we haven't seen you in a good few weeks. And also our own litter picking group end up doing it. So that I think this needs to be looked at in a lot more detail. It's just too weak to me to be a strategy. It's just a statement of fact. Sorry.
Yes, Councillor Brady?
Can I come back on something else while I think about it? When you said you think we should positively ask for more litter bins and more to happen, we have one litter bin in our parish of Thaden Mount, which has, to the best of our knowledge, been emptied by Biffa all these last 30 years. We asked, it got damaged, so we asked about renewing it, and we were told we had to buy a new one. We were told by the council it didn't matter what design it was up to us, which we've done, and they are completely refusing to empty it. They've never emptied it since. So we do, words are one thing, but action, where we've put hundreds of pounds into this new bin, we're prepared to pick up and put stuff around the bin into it, but it's now not being emptied at all. So, and we've been told it's not going to be, and if we want it emptied, it's going to cost, it wasn't a huge amount, so I don't know what it was, I can't remember, £94 a year we would have to pay as a parish council if we wanted this bin emptied, which has been emptied for the last 30 years. So I'm just saying the words are not really going with the actions, because if this is happening in other areas, it's not really, it's not sending out the right messages. I know resources are obviously an issue. I have no complaints of Biffa and the way they go about their jobs, picking up our rubbish every week are absolutely brilliant. No complaints at all. But on the edges, on the fringes, and on the strategy to show we are trying so hard in our parish to keep it tidy. We are doing a lot on our own, and we are not getting the support that we really want. So I don't know if Mr. Warwick could look at our litter bin, please. Thaden Mount Parish. Can we have it empty for free every year, please, as it has been for over 30 years? Thank you.
I think one of the things that is coming out of this discussion tonight is that we are beginning to feel that this report is not ready for the 18th. And secondly, it seems to me that we're also saying that we don't feel like the rural areas are covered enough in this report. My third point would be, we talk about education. I'm not sure that is a thing. I think the only way we're going to solve this is by enforcement, especially with the fly tipping and things like that. If people feel like they're going to be prosecuted, however small, or have a record, I think it will stop or move it on. And the problem I seem to see is hitting areas like Brentwood now. It's moving now into Epping, into Abridge, into your ward. And where's it going to stop? I think if we don't act now, and my fourth point was, what about cameras? What happens? What is the rule on cameras, and are cameras used to stop the fly tipping and things like that?
I'd have to come back to you on the use of cameras. I believe, because the enforcement team is not part of the waste team, I believe they do use cameras, and I believe working with the community resilience team and the use of their mobile CCTV has been used. I think it's been deployed in areas where there's been hotspot areas of fly tipping. Cameras have been put in position for a period of time, but if I can go back to colleagues and come back to you on that point. Just to respond to Councillor Brady's point, certainly I've made a note around the litter bin in Thaden Mount. It does seem strange to me that if Biffa were collecting it for all those years, why aren't they now? So leave that with me. I'll look into it and get back to you.
Councillor Ryan, you would like to come back?
Yes, please. I could say, thank you, Chairman. I could say a little bit about camera enforcement for fly tipping, because we had a repeated fly tip in Chigwell some months ago, and someone was repeatedly dumping building rubbish. And I can say the environmental team did put up a mobile camera for a certain amount of time. They caught somebody, and I believe they've gone through a prosecution of that particular person. So your enforcement idea is quite right. And that has diminished the amount of fly. In fact, I haven't seen any fly tipping in the area for some time. So that is done. just a point, I picked up on 8.6, demand management, and I didn't really understand what was being made on that point. So I think, is that about a paid-for service? I didn't quite understand what the point was in terms of demand management. Thank you.
Would you like to answer that, James?
So I'm just familiarising myself with that thing. I think this is in terms of the litter picking support that officers give to community groups, and then I think in terms of we can't predict the level of demand there will be each year to clear fly tips. We had a discussion prior to the meeting about a large fly tip that we've seen already this year, that I think it took 3 days to clear because of the volume of fly tipping and the nature of the materials. There was quite a bit of asbestos. So not only does that put a demand on the waste service, but also it kind of puts a demand on the budget, because I think that fly tip alone cost £4,000 to remove. So, but again, if it's not completely clear, the wording within the paragraphs under demand management, I'm happy to take that away and relook at that.
Yes, special collection. So I was just going to come back in. One of the other things we thought of is it doesn't mention here the service we provide, which is special collections. Whereas, shall we say, people don't realise it, so they might pay someone to take something away, when it would have been just as easy to phone the council and say, can you come and get it for us? Or the reuse centre or someone like that. Instead, they're paying people to take it away, who are then dumping it. But it's
education again, isn't
it's
it?
education again, yeah.
So we keep coming back to education and enforcement, don't we?
Councillor Allgood.
Sorry, Councillor Allgood.
Monitoring 8.3. So it's just based on a percentage of what you've recovered. That's your basis for the monitoring. Is that correct? So what's good? What's bad? If it's just going to be a chart that goes up and down, so what? I don't understand that as a policy, as a strategy. What are you trying to do?
So it's
You might. That's it.
so it's applied. There is I haven't got the specific details and the technical detail on that. I can come back to you on that, but it's based on, there are street cleansing standards. So as I think it's already been referenced, Appendix 3, the street cleansing standards, there's kind of a grading and a level of the street cleansing that will be there, but there is a set criteria that is applied by the waste officers, and then in terms of this quality inspection report, that was done by an independent organisation that would apply a methodology for assessing street cleansing.
James,
Hang on.
oh, sorry.
So either one or the other, because if you're saying it meets the street cleanliness standard, it doesn't matter how much litter you pick up in the waste bins. If we're saying you've got a fantastic standard, there's no litter, full stop. Why are we bothering how much collection we're making? Do you see what I'm trying to say? You're saying you've got two standards. You're sort of saying it's amount of stuff that we actually collect as a percentage or whatever volume it is, but you're also saying it's a standard of cleanliness that we're getting to. If the standard is a gold star performance where we have no litter on it, it doesn't matter how much is in our bins or just, I don't understand how that is a strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we would prefer it in the bins and not on the floor. Which goes back to education.
It doesn't matter how much is in our bins if we've got a fantastic system and it's all cleaned up. So I don't see why that should be a monitoring point of how much stuff we've got in our bins is always how much is collected. It's irrelevant. Go for the gold star standard is what I'm saying, and then that's what you should be. Because I can't see how you're actually quantifying any of this. You just sort of will monitor it. That's not quantifying it.
In terms of what's in the bins, that's to measure the waste volume, and the street cleansing relates to the appearance of the street. So they are two separate measures that can be used to give an indication on the amount of litter and the street cleansing standards.
Turn your mic on, we'd all hear it.
I said you're measuring how clean the street is. It's nothing to do with what's in the bins at the side of the street.
No, yeah. I get that. What I'm saying is it's about the state of the pavements. That's what we should be aiming for. It doesn't matter how much is collected if we've made the streets and everything. That's what I'm saying. That's your target, not how much is being collected and stuff like that. If everybody does what they should do and there's no litter, you can say there's no litter being collected, are you?
Yes, go on.
Sorry, second point. I can't see any aims for the future. Surely we should be aiming for a greener way. We should be aiming for all of this. Should be targeting, not necessarily even recycling. We shouldn't be using it in the first place. So it doesn't seem to be enough pushing of that. I mean, I always look out on the green bins in my street, and I reckon probably about 30% of the houses actually have a green bin collection. Now that means our message is not getting through, because how can people not have anything from their kitchen waste going in the green bin? It can only be going into the normal bins. So we're worried about a little bit of litter, but we haven't even got the basics right with the household residents. So we don't have an aim for the future. We should be pushing strongly the recycling. We should be pushing strongly that it gets collected.
Finished? I was just going to go back on what you said right at the beginning, James, that we haven't got a strategy at the moment. So why are we rushing this through it, not taking the time to get it right? Because that seems to be the feeling. We're under no deadlines and timelines. The intention is not to rush this through. I think there's been a lot of useful feedback and valid comments made by members tonight. So I'm happy that we can take this strategy away and work on it and kind of address the points that were raised and kind of bring it back at a later date if that's what members wish. Is it Councillor Bedford?
Thank you, Chairman. It's a difficult one. I know there's been a lot of conversation tonight about what's right, what's wrong, and what people feel is the need to move this forward. To be honest, I think we do need this. We need it sooner rather than later. I understand what people are saying. It might not be right, but I think get it in place and start working with it. You could always do a review in a year's time to see what could be added, what needs to be done. One of the key things for me on the recommendations on the front is that under number 3, with the Keep Britain Tidy campaign, I think it's about time that we add an award for cleanest villages or towns throughout Epping Forest District Council. Have an annual event held each June, which is measured, the amount of detritus and rubbish, how clean the streets are, how tidy they are, how nice they look. I mean that in a nice way with regards to like when we see flowers and things. It's a thing that's run in Ireland on a very frequent basis, and people start to take pride in the place where they live. The problem we've got is we have a lot of transient people that pass through our district that just throw stuff out of cars. I've been dealing with a lot of children today from Ivy Chimney School who, through Janet and her team, passed me a load of letters and asked me to make contact with the school. I've had to respond and write something like 15 letters to the children at the school because they're all concerned, and these are 9 to 11-year-olds, concerned with the environment and the impact that we're having when we put things like micro beads in water. When women wash their faces with face creams and products, it's ending up in the water, it's going in the sea, it's going into fish, it's killing a lot of fish, killing a lot of animals and wildlife. Not that I'm championing the green side of it, but I do think I take on board what the children of this district want. And they want to see positive action. One of the children today wrote to me in the letter and said, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about all this waste and litter? And yes, I did go back with some responses. This is an opportunity for us as councillors to actually start something happening in the district. We don't have a policy at the moment. We need something to happen. And the children of the district will be looking to us to make sure that we start the ball rolling. We can add to it later. Thank you.
Councillor Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. And it's really interesting, actually, and you can see from this debate today how passionate people are about litter and keeping our community clean. I know it's something that's certainly important to me, and I've been running community litter picks in Epping and across my county council and district wards. I think this report, or this report, is very high level, and I think a strategy for litter and our kind of waste strategy is absolutely vital. However, I do think there is an opportunity to expand on the detail before it comes to Cabinet, and I think scrutiny is a good thing. That's what you're here for. You're here to flesh out the report. And actually, a lot of what Councillor Brady said around the rural areas, I think is really important, and parts of my ward are rural, particularly Thornwood Common, and we do have real issues with fly tipping. And on my end, the enforcement side of it, I think there is more we can do and more pressure we can apply, and also in conversations with the police and other partners to try and tackle this more. So my general comments, I agree it's important that we have a strategy, and thank you for all the work you've done on this, James. I know you've had a busy time with other things as well, so thank you for that. But I do agree, and there's certainly quite a lot from this committee today that we can expand upon that report and recommendations. Thank you.
Councillor Avey.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Well, I support this report as part of my portfolio, and echo everything my Cabinet colleagues have said, whereby we do need a litter policy. We haven't got one, and I'm not sure quite what some of the concerns are and how I would see that reflected in this strategy. I'm quite happy for it to go away as quickly as possible and be looked at. However, I think we've got to be realistic, and we all are rather frustrated. For example, I've been, as a portfolio holder, frustrated ever since I took over the portfolio with Essex's strategy around its dumps, and the fact Essex will not accept the fact that because you do not allow people to take building waste there, means it's going to be dumped on our roads. They will not accept that. And we have in the past put that to Essex and will continue to do so. However, I think we need to make sure we do have a strategy document which really looks at the front end as much as the back end. And we've looked at enforcement before. We do enforce. There is enforcement going on. People are being prosecuted for fly tipping. However, the real problem I see is with the smaller agents of fly tipping, such as people chucking things out of car windows as they pass through my ward, Epping Upland, which has a road which is constantly covered by random litter. And those are things that we will put more effort into, but frankly, the budget doesn't allow us to have micro cameras on every road trying to prosecute people for dropping a can out of a car. And really, therefore, we have to look at the front end, which is around education and educating people that this is not the way forward. Equally, the other comments about recycling, yes, we should I mean, we as an authority in Essex have a good record for recycling. We are one of the top recycling areas in the county. And we should be pushing people to recycle more and more. Ultimately, where we'd all like to be is we don't have stuff to recycle. And we're producing less recyclable waste, quite frankly. But in the interim, we do need to educate people, and we should start off with young people. As they grow up, perhaps they will think twice about coming home from school and just depositing waste on the way home from school on our streets. So I can see all that, but let's not, I would urge you not to delay this too long. I would not want this to be kicked down the road for months and months and months, quite frankly. And I think we need a starting point. So as quickly as possible, we should have a litter strategy in place. Thank you.
I think in lots of ways I agree with you. I think this is a very good starting point. I think the question is how long it's going to take to beef it up a little bit, if you like. I'll put that to James.
Yeah, like I've said, it's been an interesting discussion, and there's a lot of valid and good points that I can take away and incorporate into the strategy to strengthen it and liaise with colleagues, especially in terms of the enforcement and develop actions. That can all be done, and presumably the next steps would then for the report to come back to this group. So yeah, we can I can have a refreshed strategy for the September meeting if that's happy. And
How do you feel about that, members? I think that's what, as a group, we would prefer, yes? So if you could. Thank you. Councillor.
Yes, you send us away into a bit of a vacuum and then it comes back and then we go through the same discussion. Is there a place then, if there appears to be no progress, to then initiate a task and finish where we actually have active input as a scrutiny committee?
James?
I'd be... Oh, sorry.
I think if there's going to be a task and finish group, overview and scrutiny have to recommend that there is a task and finish group, so there would be a delay on that while those meetings, but it could be proposed to overview and scrutiny that task and finish was set up.
Do you want to propose it?
Or would it be too late?
I think it's too late, isn't it?
It is for the next meeting, so you'd be moving through the municipal year.
Yeah. James, do you want to come back?
It's just that this report lands on our desk and we look through it and agree with the idea, but we're very critical of how it's done, and we then send you away. Are we giving you guidance? Do you feel that you have been given sufficient guidance before September, that we don't go through the whole thing again? I trust that you will.
James.
I think I've got more than enough guidance. What I'm more than happy to do, that once I'm comfortable with the revised strategy, I'm happy to circulate it to members prior to the September, so then you can feed back directly to me any comments, and then so hopefully when it's presented in September, it'll be a lot more straightforward.
Councillor Whitehouse, you wanted to come back?
Yes, Chairman, on page 7, under key objectives, item 4, it says that scrutiny panels can to establish working groups and task and finish panels to undertake any activity within the terms of reference. So this seems to come under the fact that this scrutiny committee could set up a task and finish panel, and they don't have to go on for ages and ages. I mean, task and finish panels could meet just for a day or, you know, a couple of days in a week. Years ago, we used to have working groups where officers and members used to sit down round the table with a problem, and we shared our expertise and our different viewpoints to find a solution. And it was really satisfying to do that. And it seems this is the same sort of problem. You sit round the table, you bring your different views, and, you know, after a couple of hours, hopefully, you know, the officers have enough ideas to go away and write the strategy up again. But, you know, we're so inflexible in the way we do things, and so everything takes so long in this council where it doesn't need to.
I think, Councillor Whitehouse, speed is the thing here that we're talking about, is getting this through quickly. I think James has got probably more than enough to take away to get the basis, and if he can get it back to us, so then we've got a chance of another input perhaps before the 13th, I think might help the matter along. So my suggestion is that we recommend that it goes back, gets some more beef in it, if you like, and comes back to us on the 13th for just a short discussion, hopefully. Do we agree?
Agree.
Thank you. And thank you, James. Dates of the next meeting, as we talked about it, is 7 o'clock on the 13th of September. Close the meeting at 5 to 8. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies.